Roswell, New Mexico, the site where a flying saucer was rumored to have crashed in the year 1947, just 2 years after the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan. Many believe the timing of this UFO crash is not a coincidence. That's why in today's video, I want to tell you about how this series of events led to one of the US presidents having an alleged meeting with extraterrestrials, and it all starts in 1954 in the month of February, just 1 month after Dwight D. Eisenhower was elected president. He went on a golf trip to Smoke Tree Ranch in Palm Springs, California. It was supposed to last 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, and the funny thing is, the entire first day, nobody had any idea where Dwight D. Eisenhower was. They knew that he had traveled to town, they knew he was supposed to show up on the golf course that morning, but he didn't show up, and nobody knew why. In fact, the Associated Press reported that night that he had died of a heart attack. Until the next day, he shows up to church as if nothing happened, leaving everybody to wonder, where the heck have you been? And because a lot of people were talking about this, a press conference was called just to announce the president didn't show up for golf the previous day because he was eating a piece of chicken, and while eating the chicken, he chipped his front central incisor and had to go to an emergency dental visit to get his tooth fixed. The only problem with this story is nobody's ever been able to find the actual dental record proving that this dental visit occurred. In fact, the only evidence that he ever visited the dentist on that day is a dentist claiming to have worked on the president's tooth that day, but by the time we were going to look into the dental records, that dentist was no longer alive, and therefore his actual records were nowhere to be found. And this brings us to the rumors of what might have actually occurred. A lot of people think the entire golf trip was a cover story to him having a prearranged meeting with extraterrestrials at Muroc Air Force Base, which was later renamed to Edwards Air Force Base as it is known today. And this rumor started because Gerald Light, a researcher who claims to have been present at this meeting, wrote in a letter to a colleague friend of his just 2 months after this trip occurred, "The report is true, devastatingly true. The reality of other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realm of speculation. During the 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance of Etherians. It has finally happened. It is now a matter of history." And coincidentally, when you look into the records of Muroc Air Force Base, you see they shut down all incoming traffic for a period of 3 days, the same exact period of time the president went missing. Which brings us to the theories of who were the actual extraterrestrials that he was meeting and what was the purpose of this meeting. There are 2 main theories of what actually transpired during this alleged meeting. The first theory is that he met with a race of ETs called the Nordics. Now, the Nordics are apparently supposed to look exactly like us, but have blonde hair, blue eyes, and they want humans to put down their nuclear weapons, and in exchange, they'll give us spiritual guidance, and they'll also give us technology. And apparently, Dwight D. Eisenhower didn't want to take their deal because it's kind of suspicious that you want us to put away our nukes when we're in the midst of the Cold War with another nuclear superpower. Which brings us to the second theory of what actually happened during this meeting, and that is that he met with the gray aliens. And during this meeting, the Greys told him that they were from the Zeta Reticuli star system, from a distant planet that was dying off, and in order to save their species, they needed samples of human DNA to incorporate into their own genetics so that way they could go on and survive as a species. In fact, Phil Schneider, another government official, said in the 1990s a treaty was formed called the Greada Treaty.
In 1954, Eisenhower signed a pact with alien species number 3 at the time,
where they would give us advanced technology.
We got this from the large grays, capable of withstanding temperatures 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
In return, being able to abduct a few humans here and there and sample some of their DNA for their purposes.
The aliens had come in and exchanged technology, and they'd want to take an occasional human being and a few cows.
What came out of this treaty was an underground base in Dulce, New Mexico, and a base at Groom Lake in Nevada that you may know of as Area 51. On our end, they would have to provide lists of everybody they abducted. The people that they abducted could have no memory of the encounter, and they had to return them unharmed. Now, here's where the plot thickens. The gray aliens decided to not actually abide by the rules of the agreement.
Aliens are notorious liars, even greater liars than humans are.
They were abducting millions instead of thousands of humans. They were giving incomplete lists. They weren't returning everybody who they abducted, and cattle mutilation started appearing all across the country.
The agreed in 1954 treaty had been violated.
Which brings us to a second alleged meeting with the gray aliens that happened at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. This was a prearranged meeting where Air Force One landed on the tarmac, 3 flying saucers approached the runway, landed, Dwight D. Eisenhower was seen getting out of Air Force One, shaking hands with one of the aliens, then going into one of the flying saucers where he remained for 45 minutes plus, came out unharmed, and that's the last we know about this meeting. Now, here's where the plot thickens. Both of these meetings were said to have been recorded, but they had to use spring-driven motion picture cameras because electrical cameras wouldn't work in the presence of the UFO technology. In fact, President Clinton from the 1990s is on record having asked for the footage of a president meeting aliens at an Air Force base, and this was confirmed by Chris Mellon, who's a former Secretary of Defense for Intelligence.
A request that came to me from President Clinton, a UFO out at Edwards Air Force Base, and it was videotaped. He wanted to get hold of the tape.
And when you think about Bill Clinton specifically asking for that footage,
got nowhere with that. The Air Force was adamant that there was no such tape.
And then you compare it to what he said in this speech right here.
If the United States Air Force did recover alien bodies, they didn't tell me about it either, and I want to know.
It makes you wonder, did this meeting actually occur between Eisenhower and extraterrestrials? Which brings us to the actual footage of the second alleged meeting in 1955. This is where it gets crazy. President Nixon, in his efforts to be re-elected, he wanted to have all these science and space documentaries created to paint him in the public eye as a president who wants to promote science and space exploration. And so they hired filmmaker Bob Emenegger, who had made some promos in the past for the government, and they said, if you're willing to create these films for us, we'll give you 600 feet of 16mm film of President Dwight D. Eisenhower meeting extraterrestrials at Holloman Air Force Base. And so he obviously said yes to this, created all these different films, and one of those films was called UFOs Past, Present, and Future, which he did release in 1975. Now here's what's crazy. The night that the government was supposed to give him access to this footage, they call him up and they say, we've changed our mind. Instead of the full thing, we've cut out the actual meeting part, but we'll give you footage of a flying saucer flying over the hills going towards Holloman Air Force Base. And he took this footage, put it in his movie UFOs Past, Present, and Future, and released it in 1975 as the smoking gun footage that all of this is true. And here is that footage that was included in that film.
Of the three objects, one of which breaks away.
And this film was seen by none other than Steven Spielberg in the 1970s, and it is said that this film is the inspiration that led him to create Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So if you really think about it, because of Nixon wanting to get reelected, the government leaked footage of a UFO meeting a US president and indirectly shaped our idea of what UFOs and aliens actually are. You could almost say Hollywood movies and gray aliens with big eyes is indirectly based on a true story. And if you think that's crazy, just wait until you see this video right here of the UFO that's preventing Russia from landing on Mars.